A long story of the Middle Ages: war, death, law, and identity. When the Norman kings settled into England after 1066, they did not bring peace. Instead, Britain entered a long and restless era known as the Middle Ages, a period shaped by war, disease, power struggles, and slow but lasting change. For centuries, life for most people was uncertain, ruled by kings who fought both at home and abroad, and by forces no one could control. War at home: England, Wales, Scotland, and Ireland. The English kings believed that their power should stretch across the whole of Britain and beyond. This belief led to constant conflict. In Wales, the English kings were determined and ruthless. After years of fighting Welsh princes, King Edward I finally crushed Welsh resistance. In 1284, he introduced the Statute of Rhuddlan, which formally annexed Wales to the Crown of England. To make sure the Welsh could never rebel again, Edward ordered the construction of enormous stone castles, including Conwy and Caernarfon. These castles were not just military bases. They were symbols of English dominance, towering over Welsh towns and landscapes. Over time, Welsh rebellions were defeated. By the mid-15th century, English control was complete. English law replaced Welsh customs, and the English language was imposed in administration and government. Wales was no longer independent. Scotland, however, was a different story. English kings tried repeatedly to conquer Scotland, but Scottish resistance was fierce. In 1314, at the Battle of Bannockburn, the Scots, led by Robert the Bruce, defeated a much larger English army. This victory became legendary. Unlike Wales, Scotland remained unconquered, preserving its independence, identity, and monarchy. Ireland followed yet another path. At the start of the Middle Ages, Ireland was fully independent, ruled by Irish kings. The English first arrived not as conquerors, but as helpers, sent to support an Irish king. But once there, they stayed. By 1200, English rulers controlled an area around Dublin known as the Pale. Outside the Pale, English power was weaker. Some Irish lords accepted the authority of the English king, while others fiercely resisted. English control over Ireland remained limited and unstable throughout the Middle Ages. War abroad: Crusades in France. English kings were not only fighting at home, they also sent armies abroad. Many English knights joined the Crusades, religious wars in which Christian armies from Europe fought to control the Holy Land. These wars were long, costly, and deeply shaped medieval thinking about faith and duty. England also fought one of the longest wars in European history, the 100 Years' War with France. Despite the name, it lasted 116 years. English kings claimed the French throne and sent armies across the Channel. One of the most famous moments came in 1415 at the Battle of Agincourt. King Henry V, leading a small and exhausted English army, defeated a much larger French force. This victory became a symbol of English courage and military skill. Despite moments of success, England could not hold its lands in France. By the 1450s, the English had largely withdrawn, ending their major ambitions there. Life on the land: feudalism and everyday life. While kings and nobles fought wars, most people lived simple, hard lives under a system called feudalism. The king owned all land and gave large areas to powerful lords in return for military service. These lords controlled estates and owed soldiers to the king when war broke out. Most people were peasants. Some owned small pieces of land, but most were serfs. Serfs were tied to their lord's land. They could not leave, could not choose their work freely, and had to give part of their labor to the lord in exchange for protection and the right to grow food. This system also existed in southern Scotland. In northern Scotland and Ireland, land was organized differently, owned by extended families known as clans, which gave people a strong sense of family loyalty and identity. The Black Death, a turning point. In 1348, disaster struck Britain. A deadly disease, probably a form of plague, arrived from Europe. It became known as the Black Death. The disease spread rapidly and brutally. Within a few years, 1/3 of the population of England died, with similar losses in Scotland and Wales. Entire villages disappeared. This was one of the greatest disasters in British history. Yet, from tragedy came change. With fewer people alive, there was less need to grow food and a shortage of workers. Peasants began to demand higher wages and better conditions. The rigid feudal system began to weaken. New social groups emerged. Wealthy landowners, later called the gentry, became influential. Many people left the countryside to live in towns where trade and crafts flourished. A strong middle class began to grow, especially among merchants and skilled workers. In Ireland, the Black Death hit hardest inside the Pale. For a time, English control there shrank as authority weakened. The birth of Parliament. As society changed, so did politics. Early parliaments grew out of the king's council of advisors, nobles and church leaders who helped him rule. But kings still held enormous power. That began to change in 1215, when King John was forced by rebellious nobles to accept the Magna Carta. This document established a revolutionary idea. The king was subject to the law. The Magna Carta limited royal power, protected noble rights, and required the king to consult others before raising taxes or changing laws. It laid the foundation for constitutional government. Over time, Parliament developed into two houses. The House of Lords included nobles, bishops, and major landowners. The House of Commons included knights and wealthy town representatives. Only a small minority of people could vote, but the idea of representation had begun. Scotland developed its own parliament with three estates: lords, commons, and clergy. The legal system also evolved. In England, judges developed common law based on tradition and previous decisions. In Scotland, laws were written down or codified, creating a distinct legal system that still exists today. Language, culture, and identity. The Middle Ages also shaped who the British people were. After the Norman conquest, nobles spoke Norman French, while ordinary people spoke Anglo-Saxon. Over centuries, these languages blended into English. This is why modern English often has two similar words, one French, one Anglo-Saxon. For example, demand and ask, or beauty and fair. By 1400, English had replaced French in official documents, the royal court and parliament. Literature flourished. Geoffrey Chaucer wrote the Canterbury Tales, stories told by pilgrims traveling to Canterbury. These poems captured medieval society in vivid detail. They were among the first books printed in England by William Caxton, who introduced the printing press. In Scotland, Gaelic remained strong, and the Scots language developed. Writers like John Barber, author of the Bruce, celebrated Scottish history and heroes. Buildings, trade, and wealth. The landscape of Britain changed too. Hundreds of castles were built for defense and control. Some, like Windsor and Edinburgh, are still used today. Great cathedrals, such as Lincoln Cathedral, were built as symbols of faith and power. Many had stunning stained glass windows, like those at York Minster, telling Bible stories to people who could not read. England also became a major trading nation. English wool was exported across Europe. Skilled workers arrived from abroad: French weavers, German engineers, Italian glassmakers, and Dutch canal builders, adding to Britain's diversity. The Wars of the Roses. The end of the Middle Ages. In 1455, England turned inward. A civil war broke out over who should be king. Two families fought for the throne: the House of Lancaster, Red Rose, and the House of York, White Rose. This conflict became known as the Wars of the Roses. The fighting lasted 30 years and weakened the nobility. It ended in 1485 at the Battle of Bosworth Field, where King Richard III was killed. The victor was Henry Tudor, who became King Henry VII. To unite the country, he married Elizabeth of York, joining the two rival houses. The new House of Tudor adopted a symbol combining both roses. With Henry VII, the Middle Ages came to an end, and a new chapter in British history began. Why this story matters. This 1,000-year journey explains why Parliament exists, why English law is powerful, why Britain has strong national identities, why English language is so rich and mixed. And that is why the Life in the UK test focuses on this period, not for memorization, but for understanding how Britain was shaped. If you want next, a short revision story, MCQs from this story, Hindi support,